You check your phone dozens of times a day without even thinking about it, and that one habit is slowly rewiring your entire brain. Most people pick up their phone for no real reason at all. They do it while waiting in line. They do it while eating breakfast. They do it right before falling asleep. And every single time they reach for that screen, something inside their mind shifts just a little bit more. The problem is not the phone itself. The problem is what happens to the brain when it never gets a single moment of stillness. When distraction becomes the default mode, the mind loses its ability to sit with silence. It loses its ability to focus on one thing for more than a few minutes. It loses its ability to handle even the smallest amount of stress without falling apart. And the worst part is that most people have no idea this is happening to them. They think they were born this way. They think they have always been anxious. They think they have always struggled to pay attention. But the truth is far more uncomfortable than that. The truth is that the brain they have right now is not the brain they were born with. It is the brain they built one distracted moment at a time. Every habit, every repeated thought, every automatic behavior is shaping the physical structure of the mind. And once you understand how that process works, everything about your life starts to make a lot more sense. Think about the last time you learned something new. Maybe it was driving a car for the first time. In the beginning, every single action required enormous effort. Pressing the brake felt awkward. Checking the mirrors felt unnatural. Turning the steering wheel felt clumsy and uncertain. But after weeks and months of repetition, something changed. The movements became smooth. The decisions became automatic. The whole experience went from overwhelming to effortless. That transformation did not happen because you suddenly became a different person. It happened because your brain adapted to the repeated behavior. It strengthened the connections needed for driving. It made those pathways faster and more efficient. And eventually, what once took all of your focus became something you could do without thinking at all. Now here is the part most people miss. That exact same process is happening with everything you do. Every thought you repeat is building a stronger pathway. Every emotion you practice is becoming easier to feel again. Every habit you maintain is carving itself deeper into the structure of your mind. This means that worry is a skill you can accidentally get better at. Anger is a skill you can accidentally get better at. Self-doubt is a skill you can accidentally get better at. Not because you want to feel those things, but because repetition is how the brain learns everything. It does not care whether a pattern is helpful or harmful. It only cares how often that pattern shows up. And whatever shows up the most becomes the default. This is why two people can go through the exact same experience and walk away with completely different responses. One person gets stuck in traffic and feels their shoulders tense up and their jaw tighten and their mind starts spinning with frustration. Another person sits in the same traffic and uses that time to listen to something interesting or simply breathe and let the moment pass. The difference between those two people is not willpower. It is not personality. It is not genetics. It is the set of mental habits they have been practicing for years without even realizing it. The first person has practiced frustration so many times that it now happens automatically. The second person has practiced calm acceptance so many times that it now happens automatically. Neither response was chosen in the moment. Both responses were built over time through repetition. And that is both the scary part and the hopeful part of this whole story. It is scary because it means every careless habit is slowly shaping who you are becoming. But it is hopeful because it means you are never stuck. You are never permanently broken. You are never beyond repair. If the brain can learn anxiety, it can also learn calm. If the brain can learn distraction, it can also learn focus. If the brain can learn negativity, it can also learn gratitude. The same mechanism that created the problem is the same mechanism that can solve it. All it takes is a different set of repeated inputs over a long enough period of time. But let me be honest about something important here. Knowing this information is not enough to change anything. Understanding how the brain works does not automatically rewire it. Just like knowing how muscles grow does not automatically make you stronger. You can read every book about fitness ever written and still be out of shape if you never actually move your body. The same is true for mental health. You can watch every video about mindfulness and still be anxious if you never actually practice being present. You can read every article about gratitude and still be negative if you never actually look for things to appreciate. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. It makes you feel productive without actually producing anything. And this is where most people get stuck. They consume endless amounts of information about self-improvement. They watch the videos. They read the books. They listen to the podcasts. And they feel good for a little while because learning activates the reward system in the brain. But then nothing changes in their actual life because they never translated that knowledge into consistent daily behavior. The gap between knowing and doing is where most dreams go to die. And closing that gap requires something much less exciting than inspiration. It requires boring, unglamorous repetition of small actions day after day after day. Nobody wants to hear that. Everyone wants the shortcut. Everyone wants the one trick that will fix everything overnight. But that is not how the brain works. That is not how change works. That is not how anything worth having has ever worked. Real transformation is slow. It is quiet. It happens in the moments nobody sees. It happens when you choose to put the phone down even though you want to scroll. It happens when you choose to take a deep breath instead of snapping at someone. It happens when you choose to notice one good thing about your day instead of replaying everything that went wrong. None of those moments feel important in the moment. None of them feel like they are changing anything. But every single one of them is sending a signal to your brain. And over time those signals add up. They compound. They build on each other until one day you realize you are handling things differently. You realize that situations that used to overwhelm you now feel manageable. You realize that thoughts that used to consume you now pass through without sticking. You realize that you have become a slightly different person without even noticing when the shift happened. That is how real change works. Not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in thousands of tiny invisible moments that nobody else will ever see or celebrate. Now let me talk about something that makes all of this much harder than it needs to be. The modern world is designed to keep your brain in a constant state of stimulation. Every app on your phone is engineered to capture your attention. Every notification is timed to pull you back in just when you were about to do something else. Every feed is designed to keep you scrolling just a little bit longer. And your brain is not equipped to resist this kind of environment because it evolved in a world where stimulation was rare and valuable. For most of human history, finding something new and interesting required effort. You had to walk somewhere. You had to talk to someone. You had to explore your environment. But now infinite novelty is available without moving a single muscle. You can lie in bed and scroll through more new information in 10 minutes than your ancestors encountered in an entire month. And your brain does not know how to handle that. It treats every new piece of content like a small reward. It releases a tiny burst of satisfaction every time you see something interesting. And that feels good in the moment, so you keep doing it. But over time something happens. The baseline shifts. What used to feel exciting becomes boring. What used to feel satisfying becomes ordinary. And now you need more stimulation just to feel the same level of engagement you used to get from much less. This is why so many people feel restless and bored even though they have access to more entertainment than any generation in history. Their brains have adapted to constant stimulation. And now anything that requires patience or sustained effort feels almost painful by comparison. Reading a long article feels difficult. Having a slow conversation feels boring. Sitting alone with your own thoughts feels unbearable. Working on a project that will not show results for weeks or months feels almost impossible. These are not signs that something is wrong with you. These are signs that your brain has been trained to expect immediate rewards and now struggles with anything that requires delayed gratification. And this affects far more than just productivity. It affects relationships. It affects emotional health. It affects the ability to be present with the people you care about. Think about the last time you had dinner with someone you love. Were you fully there with them? Were you listening to every word they said? Were you looking into their eyes and feeling connected to them? Or were you half present with one eye on your phone waiting for the next notification? Most people would answer honestly that they were not fully there. And they would feel guilty about it. But guilt does not fix the problem. Understanding what is happening and making small deliberate changes is what fixes it. The brain needs downtime. It needs moments of nothing. It needs space to process, to integrate, to rest. Without those moments, it stays in a constant state of low-level stress. The nervous system never fully relaxes. The mind never fully settles. And over time, that chronic low-level activation wears you down in ways you do not even notice until you suddenly feel exhausted for no apparent reason. This is why so many people feel tired all the time even though they are not doing anything physically demanding. Their brains are exhausted from never stopping. They go from screen to screen, from task to task, from thought to thought without ever giving their mind a real break. And they wonder why they feel so depleted at the end of every day. The solution is not to eliminate all technology or move to a cabin in the woods. The solution is to create small pockets of stillness throughout your day. Moments where you are not consuming anything. Moments where you are not producing anything. Moments where you simply exist without needing to be entertained or stimulated. This can look like eating one meal without your phone nearby. It can look like walking for 10 minutes without headphones. It can look like sitting quietly for 5 minutes before you start your morning routine. It can look like taking 3 deep breaths before you respond to something that upset you. These are not dramatic changes. They are not time-consuming. They do not require any special equipment or training. But they send a powerful signal to your brain. They teach it that stillness is safe. They teach it that boredom is survivable. They teach it that you do not need constant input to be okay. And over time, that lesson changes everything. It restores your ability to focus. It calms your nervous system. It gives your mind the space it needs to think clearly and creatively. It makes you more patient with yourself and with others. It helps you sleep better. It helps you feel less anxious. It helps you enjoy simple pleasures that used to feel boring. all from doing less, not more. Now there is another piece of this that most people overlook entirely. The way you talk to yourself inside your own head has an enormous impact on how you feel every single day. Most people are completely unaware of their inner dialogue. They do not realize that they spend hours every day telling themselves stories that are not true. Stories about how they are not good enough. Stories about how everyone else has it figured out except them. Stories about how they will never succeed. Stories about how they do not deserve good things. These stories run on autopilot. They play in the background like a radio station you forgot to turn off. And because they are so familiar, they feel true. They feel like facts rather than thoughts. But they are not facts. They are habits. They are patterns your brain learned from past experiences and now repeats automatically because that is what brains do. They automate whatever gets repeated the most. And if you spend years repeating negative stories about yourself, then those stories feel like the truth even when they are completely unfair and inaccurate. A person might make one mistake at work and immediately think something like, "I always mess everything up." But that is not true. That is a generalization based on a feeling, not on evidence. In reality, that person probably does hundreds of things correctly every single day. But the brain does not focus on those things because they are boring and expected. It focuses on the mistake because mistakes trigger a threat response. And once that threat response is active, the brain starts scanning for more evidence that something is wrong. This is called confirmation bias. Once you believe something, your brain starts noticing everything that supports that belief and ignoring everything that contradicts it. So if you believe you are not good enough, your brain will find endless evidence to support that conclusion. It will ignore your successes. It will minimize your strengths. It will magnify your failures. And it will do all of this automatically without you ever realizing it is happening. This is why positive thinking alone does not work. You cannot just paste happy thoughts over top of deeply ingrained negative beliefs and expect everything to change. The negative beliefs are too strong. They have too much momentum. They have been reinforced too many times. What works instead is learning to catch the thought before it becomes a belief. Learning to notice when your mind is telling you a story and asking yourself one simple question. Is this actually true, or is this just a thought? That question creates a tiny gap between the thought and your reaction to it. And in that tiny gap you have a choice. You can choose to believe the thought and let it dictate your emotions. Or you can choose to acknowledge the thought without giving it power. You can say to yourself, "That is an interesting thought, but I do not have to believe it right now." You can say, "Maybe that is true, or maybe it is not." You can say, "I notice I am feeling anxious right now, and that is okay." None of these responses require you to be perfect. None of them require you to be endlessly positive. They simply require you to stop automatically believing everything your mind tells you. And that one skill changes everything over time. It gives you back control over your emotional life. It stops you from spiraling over small things. It helps you respond to difficult situations instead of just reacting. It creates space between what happens to you and how you choose to interpret it. And in that space is where all of your freedom lives. Now let me talk about loneliness, because it is more connected to everything we have discussed than most people realize. Human beings are social creatures at the deepest level. Connection is not a luxury. It is a biological need as fundamental as food and water and sleep. When that need goes unmet, the brain interprets it as a threat to survival. It activates the same stress pathways that would fire if you were in physical danger. And it keeps those pathways active until the need for connection is met again. This is why lonely people often feel anxious and exhausted and irritable even when nothing bad is actually happening in their lives. Their nervous system is stuck in a state of low-level alarm because it senses that something essential is missing. And the cruel irony is that loneliness often makes it harder to connect. When you feel lonely, you become more sensitive to social rejection. You start interpreting neutral interactions as negative ones. You assume people do not like you. You pull away before they can pull away first. And that behavior creates more isolation, which creates more loneliness, which creates more withdrawal. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle that is very difficult to break from the inside. But here is the important part. Loneliness is not the same as being alone. Some people spend hours by themselves and feel perfectly content. Other people are surrounded by others all day and still feel deeply lonely. The difference is not about the number of people around you. It is about the quality of connection you feel with them. You can have 1,000 online followers and still feel completely unknown. You can have dozens of acquaintances and still feel like nobody truly understands you. Because what the brain actually needs is not just social contact. It needs genuine, authentic, vulnerable connection. It needs to feel seen and heard and understood by at least one other person. And that kind of connection requires something most people are afraid to offer. It requires honesty. It requires letting someone see the real you, not just the polished version you present to the world. It requires admitting that you struggle sometimes. It requires asking for help when you need it. It requires showing up consistently even when it is inconvenient. These are small actions, but they build real relationships over time. And real relationships are the single strongest predictor of long-term happiness and health. Not money. Not status. Not achievement. Not intelligence. Connection. People who maintain close, meaningful relationships live longer and healthier lives. They recover faster from illness. They handle stress more effectively. They report higher levels of life satisfaction at every age. And people who lack those connections suffer in measurable ways regardless of how successful they appear on the surface. So if you want to build a stronger mind, one of the most important things you can do is invest in your relationships. Not in a transactional way. Not in a way that expects something in return. But in a way that simply prioritizes showing up for the people who matter to you. Send the message even when you do not have to. Ask how someone is doing and actually listen to the answer. Remember the small details. Follow up on things they told you last time. Express gratitude when someone does something kind. These behaviors seem insignificant, but they are the building blocks of trust. And trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. Without it, you can be physically close to someone and still feel miles apart. With it, you can be separated by distance and still feel deeply connected. Kindness is another piece that people underestimate. Most people think of kindness as something you do for others. And it is. But research consistently shows that acts of kindness also benefit the person performing them. When you help someone or express appreciation or go out of your way to make another person's day a little better, your brain registers that as a positive experience. It reinforces neural pathways associated with connection and meaning and purpose. So kindness is not selfless in the way most people think. It is actually one of the most effective strategies for improving your own mental health. It gets you out of your own head. It shifts your focus from your problems to someone else's needs. It reminds you that you have value and that your actions matter. And it often creates a positive feedback loop where your kindness inspires kindness in return, which strengthens the relationship further. None of this requires grand gestures. A genuine compliment takes 5 seconds. Holding the door takes 2 seconds. Asking someone about their day takes 30 seconds. Remembering something important to them takes 0 extra time. These tiny moments of consideration are what separate people who have strong, supportive relationships from people who feel chronically disconnected. Now let me address something about purpose because it ties everything together. Human beings need a reason to get up in the morning. They need something to work toward. They need something that gives their daily actions meaning beyond just getting through the day. Without purpose, even easy tasks feel heavy. Without purpose, rest does not feel refreshing. Without purpose, free time feels empty rather than enjoyable. This does not mean you need some grand cosmic mission. It does not mean you need to save the world or achieve fame or build an empire. Purpose can be as simple as being a good parent. It can be as simple as mastering a craft. It can be as simple as contributing to your community in a small but meaningful way. The key is that it matters to you, not to anyone else, not to society, not to social media, just to you. When you have something that matters to you, the difficult moments become easier to endure. You can tolerate discomfort because you know it is in service of something meaningful. You can delay gratification because the future reward feels worth the present sacrifice. You can push through resistance because the goal on the other side gives your effort a reason to exist. But without that sense of meaning, resistance wins every time. The brain will always choose the path of least resistance unless there is a compelling reason to do otherwise. And purpose is that compelling reason. It is the thing that makes discipline feel less like punishment and more like investment. It is the thing that makes hard work feel less like suffering and more like building. It is the thing that makes sacrifice feel less like loss and more like choice. So if you are feeling stuck or unmotivated or lost, one of the most useful questions you can ask yourself is, what am I building? What am I working toward? What would make me proud of how I spent my time? The answer does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be final. It can change as you grow. But having some answer is better than having none. Because the brain without direction will default to whatever is easiest. And whatever is easiest is rarely whatever is most fulfilling. The people who live the most satisfying lives are not the people who avoided all difficulty. They are the people who chose their difficulty on purpose. They picked something meaningful and accepted that it would be hard. They showed up for it day after day even when it stopped being exciting. They kept going after the initial motivation faded because they were not relying on motivation. They were relying on identity. They had decided who they wanted to be and they acted accordingly regardless of how they felt in any given moment. This is the difference between motivation and discipline. Motivation is a feeling. It comes and goes like weather. You cannot control it. You cannot summon it on command. And if you wait for it to show up before you take action, you will spend most of your life waiting. Discipline is a choice. It is available every single day regardless of your emotional state. It does not require you to feel excited or inspired or energetic. It only requires you to decide in advance what matters and then follow through when the moment arrives. Discipline sounds harsh, but it is actually the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself. Because the version of you that exists 6 months from now will either thank you for the habits you built today, or wish you had started sooner. Every day you have two options. You can do what feels good right now, or you can do what will make your future self proud. These are not always the same thing. And the ability to choose the second option even when the first option is more appealing is what separates people who grow from people who stay stuck. But I want to be clear about something. This is not about being hard on yourself. It is not about punishing yourself for imperfection. It is not about never resting or never having fun or never taking a break. Those things are essential. Rest is not laziness. Play is not wasted time. Joy is not something you have to earn. The goal is not to become a machine that produces endlessly without stopping. The goal is to become someone who uses their time and energy with intention rather than letting it drain away unconsciously on things that do not actually matter to them. There is a huge difference between choosing to relax and accidentally wasting hours because you could not stop scrolling. There is a huge difference between enjoying entertainment and using entertainment to avoid facing something uncomfortable. There is a huge difference between resting after effort and never making effort in the first place. The question is not whether you rest. It is whether you have earned the rest. Not in a punishing way, but in a satisfying way. The rest that follows real effort feels completely different from the rest that follows avoidance. One fills you up. The other leaves you feeling more empty than before. Pay attention to that difference. It will teach you a lot about yourself. Now I want to bring all of this together. Your brain is not fixed. It is constantly changing based on what you repeatedly do, think, and feel. Every moment of every day you are either building the mind you want or reinforcing the mind you already have. There is no neutral. There is no standing still. You are always moving in some direction even when you think you are doing nothing. Doing nothing is itself a repeated behavior. And it builds its own neural pathways just like everything else. So the question is never whether you are training your brain. You are always training it. The question is what you are training it to do. Are you training it to focus or to be distracted? Are you training it to be grateful or to be resentful? Are you training it to be calm or to be anxious? Are you training it to believe in your ability or to doubt it? These are not philosophical questions. They are practical ones. And the answers are determined not by what you think or feel or believe in theory, but by what you actually do repeatedly in daily life. Your actions are your votes for the person you are becoming. Every time you choose distraction, you cast a vote for a distracted identity. Every time you choose presence, you cast a vote for a present identity. Every time you choose kindness, you cast a vote for a kind identity. Every time you choose courage, you cast a vote for a courageous identity. No single vote determines the outcome. But over time the votes accumulate, and a clear winner emerges. And that winner becomes your identity. Not because you decided it intellectually, but because you built it behaviorally, one small choice at a time. This is why change does not require perfection. It only requires a majority. You do not have to get it right every single time. You just have to get it right more often than you get it wrong. And even that standard is more forgiving than most people think. Because the brain responds to trends, not to individual events. A single bad day does not erase weeks of good habits. A single moment of weakness does not undo months of growth. What matters is the overall direction. What matters is whether you get back on track after you fall off rather than whether you never fall off at all. Nobody does it perfectly. Nobody maintains perfect focus or perfect calm or perfect discipline every moment of every day. That is not realistic, and it is not necessary. What is necessary is the willingness to begin again. The willingness to notice when you have drifted and gently guide yourself back. The willingness to forgive yourself for being human and then make a slightly better choice in the next moment. That willingness practiced thousands of times across months and years is what ultimately transforms a life. Not the dramatic moments. Not the peak experiences. Not the breakthroughs that feel so important in the moment. But the quiet, consistent return to what matters over and over and over again. So if you take nothing else from this, let it be this. You are not stuck with the mind you have right now. You are not stuck with the habits you have right now. You are not stuck with the emotional patterns you have right now. All of it can change. Not overnight. Not without effort. Not without patience. But it can change. Because your brain is alive. It is learning right now in this very moment. And it will keep learning for as long as you are breathing. The only question is what you will teach it next. Start small. Start today. Pick one tiny behavior that moves you in the direction you want to go. Maybe it is 5 minutes of silence in the morning. Maybe it is putting your phone in another room during dinner. Maybe it is writing down one thing you are grateful for before bed. Maybe it is taking 3 deep breaths before responding to something stressful. Whatever it is, make it so small that it feels almost ridiculous. Make it so easy that you cannot possibly fail. And then do it again tomorrow. And the day after that. And the day after that. Do not worry about speed. Do not worry about whether it is working. Do not compare your progress to anyone else. Just keep showing up. Just keep casting your vote. Just keep sending that signal to your brain. Because one day you will wake up and realize that the things that used to overwhelm you no longer do. The thoughts that used to consume you no longer stick. The situations that used to break you no longer have that power. And in that moment you will understand something important. You did not become a different person. You became more of the person you always had the potential to be. You just needed time and repetition and patience to get there. And that is available to everyone regardless of where they are starting from right now.